Welcome to the launch of the Leadership Foundation's latest research report. It's called Staffing Models and Institutional Flexibility, and the event was followed straight afterwards in the afternoon with a workshop, Working with the Grain, promoting a positive psychological contract. The Leadership Foundation's research covers topics relevant to leadership and leadership development in higher education. It is important to us that our research is of practical use to our members and practitioners. Today, June the 3rd, 2013, we launched our latest research report, Staffing Models and Institutional Flexibility. The authors are Dr. Celia Whitchurch from the Institute of Education and Professor George Gordon, University of Strathclyde. This report sits within our research theme of changing roles, structures and careers, an issue of ongoing change throughout higher education. It shows how universities and higher education colleges are developing new and innovative ways of staffing approaches as they recognise that a one-size-fits-all approach is no longer appropriate. In this video, Dr. Whitchurch and Professor Gordon will talk about how they gathered the information for the research report and a little about the institutions that took part. We hope that you'll find this discussion a useful addition to the research report itself.
When we got the research interviews undertaken, we then went away and looked for themes and ideas, sort of thematic ideas that emerged from the work, which is how we got to the three models, if you can call them models, or three approaches to staffing: the integrated approach, the partnership approach and the private sector approach, which seemed to chime, I must say, with some of the people that were here, judging by the conversations we had.
Because we said we would keep it confidential, we wouldn't name the institutions. We didn't really have the option of having 7 case studies and distilling kind of the messages directly from these 7 case studies. We had to take that material from the interview material and then try and identify the themes from that.
In order to select the institutions, we had discussions first of all with the Leadership Foundation, but also with national bodies such as Universities HR, UUK and senior figures within the sectors, to institutions that might have a different approach to staffing models. We wanted to get not exactly a representative sample, but a sample that would show different ways of approaching the issues that were current.
And we did try and get a spread of types of institution. So we had pre-92s, post-92s, some institutions coming into the HE sector from FE, a private institution. So we had a reasonable spread, but a manageable number, and 7 was the agreed number.
For me, the main outcomes was this issue about mid-level leadership, particularly, for instance, at heads of department level, even at programme level, because there seems to be an issue about the rewards that people get for this and motivations that they have for doing it, and yet it's absolutely critical and key to developing flexible staffing models, and such people often feel ill-prepared or prepared in the wrong way, and lacking confidence, I would say, and particularly in the arts and social sciences. And I think that's an issue that institutions need to address.
The significant takeaway messages, in my view, would be that actually quite a lot of change is happening in the sector. Quite a lot of experimentation is happening in the sector at a variety of scales, from relatively localised to institution-wide, where an institution has really set its course of doing a whole lot of things in a quite integrated way, or in very complex partnerships or small-scale partnerships. So the system can often be depicted as being very conservative and very traditional, and actually there's really quite a lot of change going on. Well, the big difference between the area we looked at in Hong Kong, which is the grant-funded teaching programs, and the British situation is that that's a very large and dynamic market in Hong Kong. Hong Kong has a much lower participation rate than the UK. It's trying to grow its participation in higher education. It's trying to increase hugely the number of students doing master's programs and programs of that level. And it's doing it largely through that routing, unless it's research work, but non-research programs. In the UK, that's been handled over a long period of time in a somewhat different way. But because of problems of funding that in the UK, it's likely this will become a much bigger dynamic. The main area in the UK that is like that has been MBA programs in business schools.
For me, what comes at the role of the Vice-Chancellor in large and complex institutions, which I would say the majority of higher education institutions in the UK now are, is the difficulty of handling it all themselves and having to have very strong and dispersed managers in the field, if you like, as well as a senior management team who know what's happening on the ground, particularly for staffing. I mean, that is very, very important.
Vice-Chancellors increasingly really have to work with their colleagues to set the climate for the institution, to create a shared understanding of strategic goals, of the kind of way ahead for the institution and how they're trying to pursue that, of the organisational values and the behaviours they're trying to do. So it's not the kind of heroic leader model of the Vice-Chancellor, but it is that orchestrating of that organisational structure with the Vice-Chancellor, making sure that happens, even if they actually decide that they want to have quite large amounts of bottom-up components in the strategy.
The strand that came out in the research quite strongly was how diverse the system was, and how diverse institutions are in terms of the types of staff that come in, for instance from industry and from the health practice professions, differ greatly from what we see as a linear academic career where people do their first degree, then a PhD, then become a university lecturer. That is breaking down, and I think that perhaps needs to be recognised more than it has been. Yeah. We still cling to this idea of there being a generic idea of being an academic and a generic idea of a higher education institution, which it maybe needs to be redefined in some way, not thrown out altogether, but redefined.
The research report, Staffing Models and Institutional Flexibility, is available on the Leadership Foundation website.